Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. With calving slowing down, dairy farmers are turning their attention to selecting cows within their herds that are suitable for dairy AI and a bull team ahead of the breeding season. Dairy advisor Bernadette Bennett joins us to give advice to make the best decisions to maximise genetic gain for your herd. And Bernadette started by giving insight into her dairy clients' current performance.
I'm based in North Tipperary and I am dealing with farmers who have on average 139 cows on their farms. So the national average is about 90 cows. So they kind of have an extra 49 cows over the average. The average EBI of the cows on my clients' farms is around €152. So the average EBI of herds supplying the local creameries is about €125. So it's about €27 higher than the creamery average. And then the milk production, Emma-Louise, on the farms I'm dealing with is they're producing about 463 kilos of solids. So again, 427 kilos is the average to the local creameries. So it's about 36 kilos extra than what's going to the local creamery. So the herds I have are not a representative sample of herds supplying the local creameries, but it is interesting to have a look at the herds within my client list and see how EBI is impacting their production.
And looking at that, you talk about an elevated EBI of 27 compared to their, others supplying at the local creamery. You know, how do you see EBI delivering for those herds?
Yeah, so I looked at about 100 herds on ICBF that are also on HerdPlus. So being on HerdPlus means that I get a complete picture of the production figures, the EBI prediction figures, the calving details, fertility reports, milk recordings, all that data, and any extra data that the farmer has added. So, you know, if the farmer puts up the weights of his cows, or if he puts up if there's a cow lame or anything like that, if there's any additional information gone up like that, I can go in and have a look at it. So I suppose I just looked at all the EBIs of my farms and I just ranked them to the top 20% down to the lowest 20%. So what I see is the top 20% for EBI have an EBI of €186, and them farmers are producing 498 kilos of solids, so almost 500 kilos of solids. And within the makeup of those herds in the top 20%, there are some new entrants and expanding herds. So, you know, Emma-Louise, that those herds tend to buy heifers, and the heifers tend to be the most genetically advanced animals in the herds. So it kind of makes sense that those top 20% would have a share of new entrants or expanding herds. And then when I looked at the bottom 20% of herds in my cohort, just for EBI, they had an EBI of €121. So they're €65 behind the top 20%. They're producing 451 kilos of solids. So they're about 47 kilos less than the top lads. And when we look at kind of what €1 of what 1 kilo of solids is worth, it's about €6. So the top 20% of herds on EBI on my client list are getting roughly an additional €282 in milk revenue per cow. And with the average size of herds that I deal with being 139 cows, that means they're getting about 39,000 extra euro ahead of the bottom 20%.
And that's a fairly significant number, Bernadette, €39,000. For those herds, is that straight additional profit to the bottom line? Or, you know, is there extra expense for those herds?
Yeah, so I suppose whether your cow is a 400 kilo cow or she's a 500 kilo cow, she's going to cost the same amount to keep, because she's going to need her cubicle bed and she's going to need the slurry storage and she's going to eat the same amount of silage and grass. So when you look at it, Emma-Louise, in 2021, the average cost of keeping a cow on a dairy farm was €1,650, after which you have to pay your loans, your tax and yourself. And like this year, that cost is only going to go up. So I suppose those cows that are delivering more cost the same to keep as the cows that are maybe the marginal cows in the group.
Can you give us a definition of marginal cows as you see it, Bernadette?
Yeah, so the cows that I would see that will be marginal cows are maybe the cows that are prone to lameness, or they have a high cell count. They might have a poor temperament. They might have low milk production figures on milk recordings, or maybe they have suboptimal fertility. So they're just not doing as well within the herd as your top cows. And I suppose in some cases, those marginal cows, we might not want to cull them, Emma-Louise, because they might not be, I suppose, too bad, that they are delivering something to the herd. So, when we go in and have a look then at our breeding policy, we can mark those cows to be bred to beef or to be bred crossbreeding. But those would be the cows that you would kind of aim to breed to beef, because they're not going to be genetics that you want to keep in the herd going forward.
And I think, Bernadette, it's always the thing, if you have an AI straw in that cow and she produces a heifer, particularly early in the calving season, there's always a temptation to keep her. So as you say, if you select her out for beef AI, she's going to produce a beef calf, regardless of whether it's male or female. So you don't necessarily have that temptation there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And on reflection, how can farmers identify exactly what they're looking for in their bulls and their bull team for the breeding season ahead?
Yeah, so when we look at our EBI report, Emma-Louise, it gives us a star rating on where our herd is for milk or fertility, or, in EBI in general. So I suppose it's always important to pick traits that are better than what's already in the herd. So if you only have 2 stars for milk, you really need to then concentrate on improving the milk within the herd. So even if you don't know kind of what the euro figure means, there is a page there on the EBI report that gives you where you rank in comparison to the rest of the herds that have an EBI. So it's a really simple way of seeing where you are and where you need to go.
And you also mentioned, Bernadette, that I suppose the amount of information you put into HerdPlus will, I suppose give you more power when you go selecting cows that are suitable for dairy AI, beef AI, and maybe even culling from the herd. I suppose, what is your recommendation for farmers to fully get the most benefit from that?
Yeah, so I would always recommend that you keep really, really good records, and you do put them up onto the ICBF HerdPlus. So if you're talking there that you've a cow that's lame, I'd be saying to record that lameness on HerdPlus and to select out those cows. So for example, Emma-Louise, I deal with a farmer who used to have a big problem with lameness, and he just started to select out. So a cow that was lame got marked for beef. So there's no genetics from that cow going to be used going forward in the herd. And he's at the stage now where he has an extremely low level of lameness in the herd. He's really managed to breed out that problem that was in his herd.
Looking to sire selection, Bernadette, what is important for your herds, and what is the advice that you would give herds as they're selecting bulls?
Look, there's a fantastic selection of bulls available. And I suppose when I look at the EBIs, it's clear that the group of people who are selecting sires really carefully for EBI, they're powering ahead of those who are kind of using stock bulls or low EBI bulls. So firstly, what I'd be saying to anybody selecting sires is to select a team of bulls. So if you have 50 to 100 cows, you're going to use 7 bulls. And if you have 100 to 150 cows, you're looking at using 8 bulls. And this increases the bull team reliability. We also need to use those bulls equally. So each bull should be used about 15% of the time. And overuse of bulls is especially prevalent for heifers, where I often see farmers select one easy calving bull and they use them across their entire bunch of heifers. And that can be problematic then if that bull goes down in EBI, and all your best bred animals in the herd are just bred to that bull that's after going down. So it is really important to kind of spread out your risk and to use a number of bulls.
And on that, Bernadette, that is really common, that you would use one bull for the heifers. You identify, a bull on the active bull list that is low in terms of calving difficulty, and you think you're onto a winner. And there is situations where the genetics have gone down, and that, as you say, is affecting those really high genetic merit animals in the herd. Taking into account your average herd size of 139 cows, and farmers do tend to carry between 20 and 25% replacements. So just doing a quick calculation here, that's roughly 30 or 35 heifers that will be bred in your particular herds. How many bulls should they have to inseminate the heifer crop?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at the herds, my herds, we'd be saying that each bull being only used a maximum of 15% of the time, that if you are in a situation where you have 35 heifers to breed, you are looking that you're using a minimum of 3 bulls. So at least 3 bulls that are suitable for heifers.
And moving on then, once you select your team of bulls, you have, I guess, an average of the full team. Is there any particular headline figures that you see farmers should target, across the important traits of that team?
Yeah, so what I'd be saying is, your EBI. So when we look at EBI, we want the team average to be €270. So the bull team average to be €270. And no bull in that mix should be below €200. For fertility, we want the team to be €120 with no bull lower than €80. For milk, we want the team average to be €80 with no bull lower than €50. And then on our health, we want every bull to have a positive on health. So our team average will be about €5. And then moving on to beef, Emma-Louise, when we look at kind of the beef traits, we want them to be greater or equal to minus €16. And this should ensure adequate genetics for carcass weight gain in any offspring that go for beef. So generally the bull calves.
And finally, Bernadette, what are your observations for farmers to produce better genetics for future cows in their herd, regardless of where their EBI is at right now?
Yeah, so regardless of where your EBI is, you can still make positive breeding decisions to improve the performance and profitability of your herd. And I suppose that's really important. Like if you are someone who's down on a low EBI, you can make genetic gain very quickly. So one of the things I'd say is, if you're trying to aim for good fat and protein percentages, so, if you're aiming for 9% solids, if you want 5% fat and 4% protein in your herd going forward, then you're aiming to get your fat PD to 0.28 and your protein PD to 0.18. So make sure you select bulls that have high fat and protein PD. The other thing I'd say, Emma-Louise, is, to be careful with selecting dams. That selecting dams is as important as selecting the sires. So, you can mark them there on ICBF for culling or for beef or for crossbreeding. So to make sure you do have a look at that. The other thing I would always say to farmers is to genotype their animals. So when we look at EBI, it's just a prediction of what traits they get from their dam and what traits they get from their sire. But if you go ahead and genotype the animal, you'll get what actual genetic makeup is gone into that animal, and it'll give you a much better predictor of how that animal is going to perform. So, we don't know when we look at EBI and there's no genotype, it's only really a real prediction. So we really do need that genotype to get a good feel of what has actually happened. And in particular, Emma-Louise, before a farmer sells surplus heifers, I always recommend that they genotype the whole batch of animals. Like otherwise they will accidentally sell off really good genetics. And, they've spent years trying to build up those genetics, so they want to get the use of them themselves. So, before you go and sell a batch of heifers, make sure you have a genotype for them all so that you can see what genes that those heifers did get, and to make sure that they are the bunch that you should be selling then. The other thing I would say, Emma-Louise, is on the breeding chart. The ICBF HerdPlus is a very simple website to work. If you're signed up for HerdPlus, your ag advisor can go in and work it for you, or maybe your AI sales team. So, even if you're not very good on the computer, you can still get someone to work it for you. And just to get that breeding, the selection of bulls off to ICBF as soon as you can, so that they can do up a breeding chart that they can post out to you.
I think there's some really excellent points there, Bernadette, particularly, as you say, some farmers are in the situation where they have surplus heifers, and to really make sure that you know what the genetics are of those animals, so you are retaining the very best for your herd. And that final point on the breeding chart, there is a lull in calving. A lot of people are talking about that at the moment, where they've moved from their dairy AI into beef. So while you have that breeder, do your best to get that breeding chart off, and you'll have it ready for the start of the breeding season. Thank you, Bernadette.
Thank you, Emma-Louise.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Bernadette Bennett for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.